News range. See your Holden dealer today.
And welcome back to the program. In our Canberra studio is Josh Frydenberg. He's a backbencher in the Liberals. He comes from the seat that housed Menzies and Peacock, so he's after a long line of luminaries, and many people say he's one of those with a very big future in the Liberal Party. Welcome to the program, Josh.
Good evening, Richo. Nice to be here.
Now, I had a look at your maiden speech during the course of the week, and you talked about what drives the Liberals. You said what drives us as Liberals are notions of individual liberty, individual responsibility and of fairness born out of a particular kind of equality. And that was equality of opportunity, not the other kind, equality of outcomes. I joined the Labor Party because I always believed that those at the bottom end of the scale, those who were too poor, less well educated, maybe had a disability or for a whole range of reasons, were never able really to take advantage of opportunities. Now, how do you guarantee, if you're not worried about equality of outcomes, that outcomes will be fair for those sort of people?
Well, look, I think it's very important to go back to what Menzies said when he founded the party, Richo, and that was talking about a civilised capitalism. So therefore you allow entrepreneurs and individuals to prosper through free enterprise, but for those who can't lift themselves up, you give them a hand out or a hand up. And, you know, that means having an important safety net. That means supporting things like the National Disability Insurance Scheme or proper funding for mental health. That's what the Liberals believe in. But when I talk about equality of opportunities, what it means there is that, you know, if somebody is going to go to an independent or a Catholic school, or someone's going to take out private health insurance, that they also deserve support for that because they're taking personal responsibility and making an individual choice. Just like someone works for 2 hours a week, a young kid in a country store, they should be allowed to work for 2 weeks, 2 hours a week, and we shouldn't mandate a 3-hour shift as the Labor Party has tried to do. So there is this fault line between the Liberal Party's philosophy, which appeals to me and why I joined the Liberal Party, and what the Labor Party stands for. Yeah, although you raise it, I would have thought, given the history of the last, say, 7 to 10 years, the idea, you know, for the Liberals to start talking about kids working in shops is a bit rich, given what happened with work choices, where everybody knew someone who was being mistreated working for chains, etc. When they were 14 and 15-year-olds. Everybody knew someone. Well, Rich, I'd expect you to say that, but what you didn't say is that John Howard, through creating more flexible workplaces, helped create more than 2 million new jobs and created an increase in real wages by more than 22% and saw unemployment inflation go to its lowest level in 3 decades. That was his record, and that was because he didn't just respond to vested interests, namely in the union movement, which Labor does. I think unemployment and inflation and mortgage rates are all way down on those days, so I'm not sure that that's a reasonable comparison. But nonetheless, we'll move on, because I can't expect to agree with you on all of these things. We do come from different places. But another thing that you raised in that maiden speech was was fundamentally a belief in climate change. You talked about the need for responsible sustainability, and you said the reduction of our per capita consumption of energy and non-renewable resources is necessary. Does that place you at odds with Tony Abbott? Absolutely not. We have a responsible plan for dealing with climate change, namely our direct action plan, which is costed and capped and funded, unlike the Labor Party's carbon tax, which is way out ahead of the rest of the world, and it's going to really penalise Australia because we're an energy exporting country. I mean, I suppose I was a little bit unpopular in that speech because I also raised the issue of nuclear energy. That was pre-Fukushima. But, you know, what I was doing was saying that Australia needed to move to, you know, different forms of energy supply, because in the long term we need cleaner forms of energy, because that's going to help protect and ensure a more sustainable environment. Yeah, I think no one's going to look towards nuclear energy in Australia after Fukushima, though, are they? Not in a hurry, that's for sure. Not in your lifetime, even let alone mine. And it'd have to be bipartisan too, may I say, because there are people on the Labor side like Martin Ferguson who have spoken very approvingly of nuclear energy, but it's just not on the agenda for now. No, I wouldn't say he has a majority of the Labor Party's view on that. But nonetheless, can I turn to some of the bigger issues, because you are known to have some expertise in the field of foreign affairs. And given your heritage, I wanted to ask you about Israel. Obviously, sure. At the end of last year, there was a large to-do about Australia moving to allow the Palestinians
observer status at the UN. And that move was the first time that Australia had moved away from support for Israel, right or wrong. What was your view on that?
Well, Richo, I hope you're asking me about Israel because I'm an Australian parliamentarian, not just because I'm Jewish.
Because
at the end of the day,
of course not.
Because at the end of the day, this is an important issue, and you raise an important issue. And you know, the Prime Minister, unfortunately, was ambushed by Bob Carr and Gareth Evans and others because she wanted to vote no to this vote at the United Nations, which was going to grant, and which subsequently did grant, observer state status to the Palestinians. And my view is that there's been great and strong bipartisan support for Israel, whether it was Bob Hawke or whether it was John Howard and their predecessors and successors. And unfortunately that now has been broken because Tony Abbott was prepared to vote no, and so was his coalition party room, but not on the Labor side. And you know what's important here is you're only going to get a two-state solution in the Middle East, which is the proper outcome, if it's negotiated between the two sides, if there are compromises by both sides. But by pushing one party to the table when the other is not prepared to compromise, or the other is taking up arms against the other, then that's going to create, you know, increased tensions and is not going to speed up the peace process.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, by the way, I did interview Bob Carr about this, and he's hardly someone I'd describe as being Jewish, but he was a founder of Friends of Israel in New South Wales, that I do know, and he's always been a great supporter of the State of Israel, as have I. But where we've started to part company with them, you talk about compromise, the building of these settlements makes a two-state solution well nigh impossible, does it not?
Well, I certainly agree that some of these settlements are provocative and should not go ahead. But, you know, you can't just lump all the settlements together, because some are in East Jerusalem, which will be part of the Israeli side in any negotiated settlement, and some are in the West Bank, and only 3% of the West Bank does involve settlements. So we've got to get some of the facts
wait a minute,
on the table.
If you put them in strategic positions, you make some sort of division virtually impossible. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's only 3%. If I'm able to pick the 3%, I can make a two-state solution very, very difficult.
Well, look, these are real issues, and that's why we need to get both sides to the table to try to negotiate a peace settlement. And that's why Barack Obama, who's going to be in Israel, I understand, in just a few weeks, that he will make this a real priority for his discussions with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Let's hope he can succeed. Another issue that you raised in your maiden speech was engagement with Asia, because you talked about how it must be a national endeavour, that engagement. Are you satisfied with what Australia is doing in Asia as we speak?
Look, I think we could do a lot more than we're doing. I mean, the fact is there's been only one prime ministerial visit to China since the Beijing Olympics in 2008. That's just not good enough when China is our biggest trading partner. And with Indonesia, I think we have damaged that relationship very badly over the treatment of the live animal export issue, as well as on the border protection issue. And we have a great friend in Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, the president of Indonesia, but he is going at the end of 2014. And unfortunately, Bob Carr and Julia Gillard, and before them Kevin Rudd, failed to capitalise on the goodwill that SBY has towards Australia. So I'm really hoping that when Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop get their opportunity to lead Australia's foreign policy, that we grasp the opportunity, which I'm sure they will do, to deepen our relationships with key partners in the region, namely Indonesia, China, India, Japan, Korea and others.
Just looking at Indonesia, though, the President of Indonesia has made it pretty clear that he does not favour, under any circumstances, the idea of turning back the boats. You're not going to endear yourselves to him when you take office later on this year, whenever the election might be, if you maintain that stance, are you?
Well, look, the point is it worked under John Howard with Indonesia because he respected Indonesia and they respected him. But at the end of the day, this government's done nothing to stop the boats, and as a result, you're not going to get the quality of engagement from Indonesia that we would hope from a really important neighbour. So I would say we need to escalate that relationship. We need to show better friendship towards Indonesia. We don't treat them the way we did over that live animal export issue, which was basically pulling the rug from under their feet on a key issue of food security. And if we do that, we'll get better bilateral cooperation right across the board.
And what do we do when it comes to this turning back the boat? It seems to me there's not much difference between the government and you now on policy, is there? I mean, there's really only temporary protection visas and turning back the boats. Otherwise, they've done everything you said they should do.
Well, that's two of our three legs of our policy. The other is offshore processing, which they'll drag kicking and screaming to. And you know all about the East Timor solution, which never eventuated, and the way they went about the Malaysia solution, which also didn't eventuate. So, you know, we have a proper way of dealing with our neighbours on this issue. We've stopped the boats before and we'll stop them again.
I can't bring myself to believe that. I've spoken to Scott Morrison about this many times, and it seems to me the Indonesians have changed their position. They now no longer support the turning back of the boats, and if they don't support it, it's going to be very difficult for us to do anything about it. But look, I have to leave it there. I could go on much longer with you, and I hope, Josh, you might find time to come back and talk to us again.
I'd love to do that, Graham. Thanks for having me on.
Good on you. Josh Frydenberg in our Canberra studio. Obviously the Parliament's sitting, so that's where all the pollies are at the moment. But we'll be back next week, and I hope to have Stephen Connery to talk about all of these media changes. We'll see you then.